Thank you for joining us for another edition of Sree's special election coverage featuring the latest news, analysis, and special guests. It's 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 7:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time on Wednesday morning. Some of the results are already in. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. Sree Sreenivasan is our host. Mary C. Curtis is our political analyst. Randall Yip, founder and editor of AsAmNews, is our guest. This show is part of a series of shows Digimentors is producing in partnership with Scroll and Scroll Global, one of India's most important independent websites. We're also producing the U.S. election show for the Indian Express at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, 9:30 a.m. in India on the Indian Express's social channels. Joining us, of course, Sree and Mary Curtis, but they will be joined by Dr. Lee Maringoff, director of the Marist poll. Tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time and later 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time, we will be back with another show in partnership with Scroll and Scroll Global. Our guest will be the political fixer, Shauna Vircher. Cliff Albright from Black Voters Matter was our first guest. Then we had Brandon Jones from the SPLC Action Fund. Mitra Kalita was our most recent guest. These shows are produced by Digimentors, the social digital events AI consulting firm Sree started with his friend, Andrew Lee. Again, Randall Yip, founder and editor of AsAmNews, is our guest. You can follow AsAmNews on Twitter at AsAmNews. Mary C. Curtis is a CQ roll call columnist and Equal Time podcast host. Sree Sreenivasan is our host. He's a New York City-based journalist and the CEO co-founder of Digimentors. Without further ado, let's welcome Sree Sreenivasan.
Hello, everyone. It's election night in America. It's the moment of truth. There's a Tom Nichols cover in The Atlantic magazine. We have so much to talk to you about tonight. The polls are closing, and we know that at the moment, most of the races on the battleground states, the swing states, are too close to call, too early to call. But throughout this hour, we will get updates and we will show them to you. We have wonderful guest speakers who will be with us. As you saw, Mary and Randall will be with us, and you'll have a chance to ask questions. Anything you post online on the channels that you're watching, we'll be able to bring you, like right here. Jonathan Borstein is watching. Greetings from New York, where it seems everyone I asked me today, did you vote? And yes, that is a very important question. Did you vote is something that we know is important. After all, in this country, we don't see enough people voting most years. We'll find out how we did this year. I myself voted, and as you can see, there my tag, my stickers on my shirt. You'll see that when the banner is removed. But what I said is that 81 million people voted for Joe Biden in 2020. And 74 million voted for Donald Trump, but 64 million people stayed home. And that's one of the tragedies of the American political system, where people decide to just stay home. We have so much to talk about and so much to share with you. And I am delighted to bring on my friend, Mary C. Curtis, who will be talking to us about what she's seeing in North Carolina and what we know about the news. We will be bringing you all the breaking news as it happens. Mary C. Curtis is our guest. She's our guest commentator, and she is the host of CQ Roll Call. She's a columnist there, and Equal Time podcast. Please welcome Mary Curtis.
Hello, everyone. Well, yes, I am in the battleground swing state of North Carolina, where it seems like every candidate was here all the time. My running joke was that every morning I would look under my bed and expect to see some candidate giving a speech. And just Saturday night, I was at the Kamala Harris rally here with John Bon Jovi and Kerry Washington and many, many guests. Right now, we are too close and too early to call, except for one race, and that was the very controversial gubernatorial race that probably everyone over the world knew about, the Republican candidate, Mark Robinson, who actually, there was a CNN report that he said some very controversial things on websites, although he had some very controversial quotes before that about women, about the civil rights movement, about LGBTQ rights. And as of now, they have called the race for Josh Stein, his opponent. And so we see that race called already. So we will have Governor Josh Stein, who I believe will be the first Jewish governor in North Carolina. Either would have made history, because Mark Robinson would have been the first African-American governor. But it's too early to see. As of now, he hasn't had any reverse coattails. It looks like many people came in and voted for Donald Trump and skipped that. And we'll see what the down ballot races from there. We had a lot of many other races, including a controversial candidate for superintendent of public schools, someone who didn't believe in the public schools and did not send her children to public schools, and made incendiary comments about Barack Obama and others. So we will be looking very closely at the race in North Carolina, and we'll see. It looks like the Hurricane Helene did not really affect too much of the turnout in Western North Carolina, where we saw people making accommodations, but most of them made their way to a poll. So that's what we're looking at here. And of course, we know that if Donald Trump wins it, that will really reinforce his path to 270 electoral votes. And if Kamala Harris wins it, no Democrat has since 2008, when Barack Obama won it very narrowly. And in 2020, Donald Trump won it, but it was his slimmest margin of victory. And if she wins it, that will be a big sigh of relief from her supporters, because it will be a guarantee in case she doesn't win one of those Rust Belt, Blue Wall states, or one of the Sun Belt states. And I know Randall has been on the ground and he knows a lot of what's going on in those states. So
we'll get to all of that
right now.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Mary. That's such a great setup. I know there's a lot to talk about. Paulo is watching from Philadelphia, a real belle of the ball for the candidates. And Paula Kiger is watching from Tallahassee. Best part of my day was helping out a kids voting event. Got to start the habit early. Absolutely. And this is what makes the show different. Your comments on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Instagram, all of them can be brought here and shown on the screen. So please share, tag your friends. They can watch us live or later, and you'll see no screaming here, just analysis, just facts, just helping you understand everything that's going on. Before we bring Randall, we just want to show this map, the electoral map that shows us some terms that you hear a lot. You hear battleground states, you hear also the term swing states. So you can see there are states that will be expected to be Democratic or Republican, as you can see. And then the gray ones, the beige colored ones are the ones that we're talking about, the 7 swing states. It's too early to call any of them. Everybody needs to get to 270. So if you look on the upper left, 238, 207, that's not the live numbers, but that's what's expected. And then as you add, if you added Pennsylvania, if you added North Carolina, you see the numbers move up for the Republicans. So that's why these votes matter and why these states matter. So stay tuned for that conversation as well. Now let's bring on Randall Yip, who is our guest. He's joining us from San Francisco. He's the founder and editor of AsAmNews and has been covering the elections very closely. We're delighted. Welcome, Randall.
Thanks a lot, Sree. Thank you so much, Mary. I'm delighted to be with you today. Let me just start off because, this is a very tense time for everybody. I mean, regardless of what side of the political aisle you're on, you're feeling that tension. So I just need to take a deep breath because it's just aggravating. It just really is. And, before the show, I was talking to Mary, and we were talking about in 2016, some of the swing states started breaking for Trump early. And the Democrats had this sense of defeat from early on, as early as 4 or 5 o'clock Pacific time, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock Eastern time. And that's not happening this time. So it looks like we're in for a long night. So take a deep breath and let's enjoy this.
Enjoy it is a strong word, but I totally agree about taking that deep breath. Tell us about AsAmNews and what you've been doing to tell the story of this historic election.
Well, AsAmNews is a part of the URL collective, and we received a grant from them. Without that grant, it wouldn't have been possible. But we sent reporters to Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, as well as the border state of California, to go to the U.S.-Mexican border to cover the election from various angles, from the impact of the Israeli-Gaza war on Muslim American and Arab votes, the impacts of the hurricanes on the voter turnouts in North Carolina, the impact of, just trying to get people excited about getting out to vote, first-time voters, educating them about what an absentee ballot is, what a mail-in ballot is, how to get to the polls. Those are all things that people are doing on the ground to get people out there, to get that voter turnout up.
Thank you. That's so important. I'm so glad that you're doing it. What's one thing that has surprised you in this coverage that you've been doing?
Well, Indian Americans have been very strongly Democratic. They're among Asian Americans, they're the most strongly Democratic demographic within that community. But this year, there's a slight downtick of Indian American support for Democrats, which is surprising given that, Kamala Harris' mother is from India. She's Indian American and Jamaican American. So that's a little puzzling. On the other side, Chinese Americans have been labeled as being more conservative, but I'm not so sure if that's true anymore. There is a lot of concern about, public safety, and some people feel that maybe Democrats are, less strong in that area than maybe Republicans. But I think if you really look at the overall picture, I think Chinese Americans are still leaning very Democratic.
Thank you. Srikant Gopalan is watching from New York City. Steve Taylor is watching from Philadelphia. We have people watching around the world right now. What are the things that you have seen, Mary, that are important for us to focus on? One of the things that happened when we had a female candidate in 2016 in a major party candidate in Hillary Clinton, it was acknowledged that among the many, many reasons why she didn't win was misogyny and a feeling that some Americans are not ready to be led by a woman president. This year, I've seen some of that as well, in addition to the racism angle that comes in as well. So talk to us about that.
I've been really stunned. Some of the personal insults that Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and the crowds that go to support them have tossed and hurled at Vice President Kamala Harris. It's been unlike anything. You really have not heard any candidates talk about their opponents in that way. I mean, questioning her intelligence. I hate to repeat them because they're so ugly. Questioning her racial identity, which was at a conference I attended, the National Association of Black Journalists, questioning her character and her competence. And no matter what you feel about her politics, this is a well-educated woman. She's been to law school. She has been elected a district attorney, attorney general, a senator, and vice president. You can't say, and she also very clearly bested Donald Trump in their one debate, and he didn't want another one. So that's been surprising to me. It is true that the first 2 times he ran, he didn't get overall the votes of women, but he did, Donald Trump, meaning Donald Trump, got the majority of white women. And we'll see what happens, because of course, Hillary Clinton ran before the Dobbs decision, the decision of the Supreme Court with 3 justices put on by Donald Trump, overturned Roe v. Wade. And since then, we've seen strict abortion bans in many states and instances of it really affecting women's health. And the fact that many OBGYNs are moving out of certain states. So this has had a real world impact, and not just them, but of course their spouses, friends. It's not just a woman's issue. I hate when it's framed in that way. So we have seen a real gender gap in this election. And we see that in the returns so far, with more women really going for Kamala Harris. But we've seen Donald Trump make a real play for men, particularly young men, and having a certain kind of masculinity. And we've seen them show up at the polls. So that's been a real story of this particular election, beyond the issues of the economy, the border, and others that Randall has brought up that are very important to everyone. So I think that's one big story. But as I said, personally, I cover this, but as a woman of color who is a professional woman who's worked all her life from a working class home, to see a woman of color denigrated, even compared to a prostitute, and call and response from the crowd has been beyond the pale to me, particularly when many of his strongest supporters are white evangelicals who don't seem to really have a problem with this at all.
Yeah, that's so well put. Let's see. Chris Gorman's watching. Good evening from New York. New York, thank you for being here. Folks, tell us where you're watching from. Tell us about your Sunday. Have you voted? What are you thinking? If you're not watching from the US, tell us your questions. We've got the experts right here. Randall, I'd like to hear a little bit about the state of Michigan, which is a swing state, as we know, has always been one. Very important for the Democrats to win the Asian American vote and the Arab American vote, which includes Muslim Americans as well as Christian Americans. That's been a very important election that we're all watching. So talk to us about that.
Yes, emotions there are extremely high. I mean, people are screaming at each other. People are crying. I mean, they're just torn by the Israeli-Gaza war, and they remember the Muslim ban that Trump imposed in 2016. They remember all the toxic things he has said about their community. However, they also see what they consider a genocide being conducted right now by Israel, and the U.S. support for that genocide. And they feel like the United States is not doing enough to stop the war and to intervene and to, basically move Israel toward a more peaceful solution. So as much as, they'll tell you they want to vote for Kamala Harris, they wish they could, but there are many that say they just can't bear themselves to do that. And they are willing to take a chance. They are willing to, number one, either sit out this election, or number two, vote for a third party candidate, such as Jill Stein, just to send a message to the White House that what they see as incomprehensible behavior cannot be tolerated, and they cannot forgive that. There is a certain portion of the Muslim American community and Arab American community that has come out in support of Kamala Harris. So there is that strong divide there. But when we went into Michigan and we tried to talk to some people who were supportive of Kamala Harris, they did not want to comment because the pushback they've received has been very intense. And it's almost like, gee, is it worth sticking my neck out, for this? So that's a dilemma that Kamala Harris, really has to overcome, and it remains to be seen whether it's possible for her to overcome it, because it has torn that community apart.
I will also say that in addition to the people who are really upset about Gaza, there's also a conservative streak in some Arab voters, as there are in a lot of different communities, including the Latino community, where issues about LGBTQ issues and other things like that have become a way for them to not support Kamala Harris and to support Trump. So that's something we've seen as well. And I know, Mary, you've been covering this religion aspect of this very closely.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see that. And it is playing out very differently. I can understand what Randall's talking about, because many people are saying, who are supporting Kamala Harris, well, Donald Trump has said that Netanyahu should finish the job and he has a free hand, and he and family members have investments over there. But others who have lost family members, and I do actually have friends who are from there or have family members there who have been lost. It's not up to me to tell them what they need to do for their own conscience. So I really don't step into that in any way. But I think also when we talk about religion, and you mentioned the conservative folks in that community, they have been trying to do that in every community, conservative African Americans, conservative Latinos, and that's one way they have tried to really chip away at that Democratic support in those communities. And even though they're not a majority of Americans, in certain states such as Nevada, Arizona, and Pennsylvania and other states, they can really be that difference between who wins and who loses this particular race. So,
and has anyone's watched NFL football on Sundays and these commercials that Donald Trump has been running about, Kamala Harris represents them, they, and Donald Trump represents us, and showing, what, transgender people, and Kamala Harris, saying that she wants to help them, get their operations so they can make the transition, and basically playing on those fears of people, playing on that bigotry to get that conservative vote, because he knows there's no way he's going to get the liberal vote anyway. So he's not worried about offending anybody. He enjoys offending people because he knows that other people who share his beliefs, unfortunately, cheer him on when he says that, because most people they're a little bit more courteous, and they're not going to say things like that. But Trump puts all social decor aside, and he just rips into the people's lowest common denominators, it seems, and he gets away with it.
Well, people say that they don't like negative campaigns and negative ads, but they actually work. And that's why people use them, and they get to the emotions. And you mentioned those ads about transgender people. They have pictures of people in that who are, I know there's a woman who is in the Biden administration. So they just have pictures of transgender people and pretty much saying they're something to be demonized. And actually, Trump did say that the Democratic Party was demonic. And this language that is used does have a willing audience. As I say, I talk to everyone, and there's this whole strain of thought that school shootings, it's the problem of transgender people. I mean, this stuff works with a certain group of folks, and it is interesting to see that. I mean, Mark Robinson, as I said, he went really far in this, but before his scandal, he actually said that LGBTQ people were filth and worse. And so, yeah, it works on some folks. It's emotional. And they're, the transgender folks are a small percentage, and they are bullied enough as it is. And I know people who have transgender children. I know someone that moved from Texas to Colorado, but there are other folks who can't move, and they have to make the best that they can where they are, trying to protect their children in the best way possible. And this makes it really, really difficult for them.
Let's take a look on this. Randall, sorry, just to make sure people can see what's happening with the results. Many of the states are too close to call, including Pennsylvania, including North Carolina, Georgia. So that's happening right now. And as soon as we have any news, we will bring it to you. Meanwhile, please listen to this amazing conversation. That's Randall Yip of AsAmNews, Mary C. Curtis in North Carolina, Randall in California, and I'm Sree in New York. We're on Scroll, one of India's most important independent websites, and we're live on their homepage, and we're on their social networks. Please tag a friend right now. They can watch us live or later. Even if they're watching it on the big TV, they can hear this very important conversation and ask questions about things that have to do with the elections that you haven't had a chance to ask, because when you ask a question, we can put it right on the screen and bring it to you. Randall, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just talking about, during a recent campaign rally, he implied that go ahead and try to shoot me because I have bulletproof, glass in front of me, but look who's behind me, or look who's in front of me, the reporters. I wouldn't mind if, if they got shot. I mean, those weren't his words verbatim, but it was clearly what he meant.
Mm-hmm.
And
by the way, Texas has just been called. Texas has been called for Trump, where he absolutely won very strong. And the headline was he crushed Kamala Harris in Texas. We will see Ted Cruz is leading, the controversial senator, but this is not a surprise. But anytime the Democrats were looking for Florida and some of these places to turn, that has not happened. We knew that. This is the famous needle from the New York Times. It was just been updated. It tells you where this is leaning. The presidential race, the chance of winning, it's higher right now for Trump, but that needle will move. And in the 2016 election, it gave a lot of people fits and people fainted over it. But we're going to learn more as the evening goes. So keep an eye on this. We'll bring this to you and we'll bring you the news as we go on. Please, Randall.
Well, I was just saying, here you have a man that's been shot once. There's been another attempt on his life at his golf course, or at least they thought that person was there to shoot, Donald Trump. And yet he's making jokes about people being shot. And he continuously gets away with it because by making outrageous statements like that, people just expect that of him. And they just say, that's just Donald. Well, it goes beyond, human decency, irregardless of who you want to vote for, irregardless of where you stand on the abortion issue, irregardless of where you stand on, gun control. Those kind of things should not be said, but he gets away with it.
He does.
And we've seen, that it has had consequences. We saw the young man drive to the Buffalo supermarket and shoot African Americans. The young man drive hundreds of miles to El Paso after there was talk from Republicans about a migrant invasion. We saw the Tree of Life synagogue, folks shot in a synagogue that was very friendly toward immigrants. So it just takes one person to hear this. He could say, you people don't take me seriously, but obviously one person can hear it and can trigger something in that person. I agree with Randall. This is quite serious.
Folks, we are talking with Randall Yip of AsAmNews and Mary C. Curtis. We will be talking to them for another few minutes. We have Randall with us. We want to tell you that this is one of two shows that we're doing tonight. We're in the 9 o'clock hour. We'll go till just past 10 p.m. Eastern time. And then we will have another show tonight for Indian Express, America Decides, live from New York. And that'll be at 11 p.m. Eastern time when we'll have a lot of news. And we'll be joined by Lee Meringhoff, the director of the Marist poll, and Mary will be back with us. And this is a really important show as well because we'll have a lot more news at that time. And we're very grateful to Lee and Mary for being with us. We should also let you know that we have another show tomorrow morning where we will be talking about what we have seen so far. Mary will be back with us, and the political fixer, Shauna Vercher, will be with us, and you don't want to miss that show. So if you'd like to know about our news when we are live on any of our shows, because we continue to cover the elections, please do get in touch. Email me, Sree@digimentors.group, Neil@digimentors.group. And in this card, you can see our WhatsApp alerts. When we're live, when we have very important news, only then will we trouble you. But you can see the WhatsApp QR code right on the screen. I hope you will grab that and stay in touch with us. We want to hear from everyone who's watching. Maniza is watching from New York City. Thank you very much, Maniza, for joining us. Ask your questions. We are going to go back to Randall to see what are the news that he's sharing. It looks like North Carolina is about to be called for Donald Trump by at least one of the news stations. So let's take a look at what's happening there. At the same time, it says here, NBC, it says it's too close to call, but I saw an alert saying the NBC decision desk has called it for Donald Trump. You're in North Carolina, Mary. What does that mean that the governor went for the Democrats, but the rest of the state went for Trump?
Well, Trump is his own brand. He's very popular. As you know, our gubernatorial candidate, the Republican, is very flawed. But I would love to see the turnout, because traditionally Mecklenburg County, which is where Charlotte is located, they have had a problem turning out. And there've been so many elections for a Black woman was up, Sherry Beasley, for the state Supreme Court to be the Chief Justice, who lost by 400 votes. And it's really a problem often with turnout. And I would not be surprised if Trump does end up carrying it by a slim margin. It will be because some of the traditional Democratic constituencies just didn't show up.
And that's something that we will be watching throughout. Randall, your thoughts?
Well, I don't think North Carolina is a total surprise. I think, Kamala Harris won in an upset there, but she didn't get it. And I don't think that deep down she really expected it. And people have been saying it's going to come down for her to Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And those states, have yet to be called. And so it's going to be a long night still. If you're a Kamala Harris fan, I won't get too down. And if you're a Donald Trump fan, I won't get too high.
Because this is the way the election system works. I want to remind folks that in 2008, in that historic year for Barack Obama, we knew by about 11:15 that he was going to be president. And in 2012, it took till about 1 a.m. Eastern time. And of course, in 2020, it took all the way till Saturday to know for sure that Joe Biden had won. Of course, before all of that, Donald Trump declared himself the winner at one point. He has said he will do that again tonight. And we know that he will do that. And that way it will be a question of how this goes and what that means. So thank you for those of you are watching. And look at this, Maniza is helping us break news here that New York City just has been called blue, of course, for Kamala Harris. We knew that. But all of these totals matter, because when we see the popular vote, even if you're in New York, even if you're in California and you're still in line, you know that matters. And Rose Horowitz, who has a wonderful women to follow hashtags, it says hi and nervous. So we have lots to keep track of and so much going on. We'll also show the news screen so that you can know that you're not missing any of the news over there. And we're bringing you understanding and facts instead of the screaming that happens most of the time. Let's go to Mary to talk a little bit about some of the headlines she's been following, some of the things that she's been paying attention to, and we'll put some of those headlines up as well.
Well, it's interesting. I talked a little bit this morning about we don't look a lot at what other countries are looking at this election, but they're following it very closely. Our allies, and also some of our adversaries. We've seen that Russia has been really meddling in this election. Putin, of course, wants Trump to win, but also there's a sense that he wants to show that democracy is chaotic. And recently, I just read before I came on that there were some bomb threats called into some polling places, particularly in some Black areas in Georgia, and they were traced to Putin, or Russia, I should say, as well as some ads that showed supposedly Haitians who just got here who said they just voted for Kamala Harris. They have also been traced there. And recently I went to a World Affairs Council of Charlotte meeting where there were representatives from 15 EU countries. And they, of course, pledged they of course, don't meddle in the elections, and they will work with whomever and the folks they will represent will. But of course, an issue for them was Ukraine. And they see that the parties are very different on how they say they'll deal with aid to Ukraine. And many of these countries are a lot closer to Ukraine. And they know that Vladimir Putin has, of course, delusions of trying to recreate the Soviet Union. And I thought that was really interesting. And we also have seen some countries, Italy and others, also lean to the right in their elections, and people like Viktor Orban, and who was elected but has become increasingly authoritarian, is also very friendly with Trump. And we see that CPAC, the conservative organization, they've gone back and forth. Tucker Carlson is very involved in going to Russia and say, "See, this is a great place." So this is an interesting development as well. But of course, they'll have to work with whomever. But the folks who are invested in NATO are looking at this election very carefully.
We have a question that's come for you, Mary, directly asking about North Carolina. Explain what's happening there. It looks like Kamala Harris will not win North Carolina, but Josh Stein is going to be governor of North Carolina, the Democrat. So talk about that, please.
Well, North Carolina actually has a history of voting Republican in federal elections. We have two now Republican senators, but Democratic. Roy Cooper was, I think, for the last few years, we've only had one Republican governor. I think it's because the governors get things done. And Roy Cooper had a great appeal throughout the state. So that is not unusual that they will split it like that. But I was just digging into some of the numbers on the presidential election. And of course, it was a little bit as expected. Women, there's a gender gap, went for Harris. Way I'm seeing Black voters, the last I saw, went like 87, 88% for Harris. Men went overwhelmingly for Donald Trump, and white voters in the state. We are part of the old Confederacy after all. And so even though it's like many states where there are blue pockets, and it's a rural-urban divide. And you see that playing out very much here in North Carolina. In Charlotte, we have a Black female mayor. The city council is 9-2 Democratic. There are no Republicans on the county commission, but still, and you'll see that in the Research Triangle, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Greensboro, Winston-Salem. But you get to those rural areas, and it's very, very red.
Sree, I have to commend you how you're able to ask, really insightful questions and keep track of what's going on in the television screens all around you. Amazing job. But I do have to leave in a few minutes. I do know that Georgia is probably might be called soon, but who knows? Because Atlanta tends to be, an electoral process there. The voting process tends to take a little bit longer, and Trump's voters are on the rural areas. So Harris is going to have to depend on a strong turnout in Atlanta to win Georgia. And I did also want to mention, in the 2020 elections, Ossoff and Warnock, they got into their runoff and they largely won due to the strength of a voting bloc, largely African-American voting bloc, but with the addition of the Asian-American voting bloc as well. And it'll be interesting to see if that same coalition can help Kamala Harris get across the finish line again.
What else are you watching for, Randall? Thank you very much. What else are you watching for? And I know you'll need to leave soon, so tell us other things that you're paying attention to.
Well, I'm curious about how immigration is going to play out in this election, because Joe Biden cracked down on immigration, and the flow of immigrants across the border, U.S.-Mexican border has slowed significantly. That upset a lot of his liberal followers. But when you talk to them, they realize that they're still supporting Joe Biden because the alternative is not acceptable to them. So, but what do voters in the middle, what do they think? They're the ones that are really going to decide it.
And that, of course, matters. I know that I want everyone to be able to follow AsAmNews to understand it again. If people are just joining us, tell us about AsAmNews, and you have a very exciting event coming up.
Yeah, so we're a nonprofit daily news site. We're the only Asian American Pacific Islander news site that publishes 365 days a year. And we have a wonderful event coming up at Columbia University on November 14th with Connie Chung. Connie Chung just released her memoirs, and she's going to be in a one-on-one conversation with veteran New York reporter Tiwa Chang about the racism and sexism she encountered in her early on in her career, but also her family life and navigating everything that she has done to be the first Asian American network news anchor in the country, and only the second woman news anchor in the country, woman news anchor.
And Connie Chung has been a hero to so many of us who are Asian American. She broke so many barriers, as you said, not just for Asian Americans, but also for women. We wish you the very best. Everyone, check out AsAmNews and follow everything that they're doing there. And you can see on their front page, they have a link to live and in person, the fundraiser at Columbia University. Thank you very much, Randall. Randall Yip has been our guest. We are very grateful to him for his coverage and for taking time out. What are you going to be doing right now?
I'm going to be running back to my newsroom and finding out why they've been tweeting me.
Please ask them to please blame me for this. I appreciate it.
No blame at all. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Let's take a look at where we are with the news. Thank you so much to Randall. Let's go on and see what's happening right now. New Hampshire has been called for Kamala Harris. No surprise yet there. The Georgia election is too close to call. Mohammed is asking us for more information. We're still waiting to understand what exactly is happening, where we're going. These states are just too close to call at the moment. Jonathan says, a great guest. Thank you. And that was to Randall. And of course, Mary is doing a great job. Mary, how do you find your energy? You've been going with us nonstop now for 3 nights and part of today already.
And I'll be on tomorrow, several shows, as well as I'll be in India and England. But I don't know. I don't know that I have that much energy. It's just sort of kind of at this point, I'm going on fumes. I just saw Maryland pop up, which is my home state, and there's that important Senate race between Larry Hogan, the Republican, who Mitch McConnell, of course, was recruiting because he wants to add to the Senate majority for the Republicans, and Angela Alsobrooks, who would be the first Black female senator in Maryland. And I have interviewed Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report, because even though Hogan was a very popular Republican governor and he was doing pretty well in the polls, she said increasingly it's more and more difficult for states that are red or blue to separate that. And I see that also Brooks is leading so far in the polls because she, of course, was running saying, listen, he says he would be a moderating influence, but he would be adding to a Republican majority. But you see that turning against folks like John Tester in Montana, who's a Democrat who's managed to be reelected in a state that has gone increasingly red, but he may not survive this year, even though his opponent has some problems, it's little scandals here and there. And it's also going to be tough going for Sherrod Brown in Ohio against Marino, because he's been able to keep getting elected because he is a person of Ohio. And he says, yeah, I'm looking out for the citizens of Ohio. But he's running against that tide of folks who go in and they're red, they vote for Trump, and they just vote Republican down the line. So that's going to be difficult. Same way as in Texas. Colin Allred is doing very well in the polls, but as we saw, the state overwhelmingly went for Trump. And there'll be people who say, I really don't like Ted Cruz much, but he's a Republican. He's going to be there and be a part of that Republican majority. And you don't see the ticket splitting that you may have seen in the past. So in Florida, it's interesting to see how red that's become when, of course, Barack Obama won it twice. And it was, of course, 2000. It's the swingiest of swing states, but that has pretty much disappeared there, Ohio, and in some other states. So increasingly, it's down to these 7 states. And as we see, North Carolina is this, after 2008, the Democrats keep moving toward it. We can maybe get it this time. And it just seems like they can't get over that particular finish line.
Thank you. Let's take a look. We have an international audience. We want to explain to them what we mean by swing state and battleground state. So you can see there are states that are red and blue because we know that's how they're going to vote most likely. And then there are the beige colored, these light yellow colored states here. And those are the ones that will help either candidate get to 270. So this is just projections. So if you look at 238 for the Democrats, 242 for the Republicans, if we're calling North Carolina, let's see if he gets that.
Right.
And then if Georgia goes, then he's at 258. Then what it will mean is that for Kamala Harris to win, she will have to win what's called that blue wall of Pennsylvania. Let's put that in her column, Michigan in her column, and Wisconsin. If that's in her column, then she gets to 270. Otherwise, she does not. If she loses Michigan, for example, then she's below that number. That's why Michigan is so important. And then she would have to rely on Arizona and Nevada. In Arizona, a terrible candidate named Kari Lake, who is an election denier and has just been the most extreme right-wing candidate, is up for the Senate against Ruben Gallego. And we are watching Ruben be in the lead as of now, but we don't know where this is going to go. So your thoughts on these developments?
Well, it's so interesting. I was just looking at, like I said, I've been also trying to look at in the internals in some of these, and Georgia, I think, is quite a bit of the vote is in. So I think 77 to 80%. So she's really counting on Atlanta to bring her over the finish line. It's looking really tight right now. It's funny you bring up these states. I realize how many states I've lived in because I used to live in Arizona as well. And you have a large Mexican-American population there, a Native American population there. So that's really interesting how that will go. Of course, Joe Biden put the first Native America, Deb Haaland, Secretary of the Interior, into his cabinet. Will that help Kamala Harris with that particular constituency? We will see. There's also problems of access because so many Native Americans live in different areas. They might not have the same amount of polling places. All of this comes into play. And, I was just looking at Pennsylvania, too, that some of the absentee ballots and write-ins have been thrown out from young people because they're not used to writing their signatures, right? And so the signature on the license and the forms don't match up. So they'll say, this isn't the same signature. Where really it's just young people who don't really write their signature an awful lot. So, I mean, these all sound like random things, but it looks like it's coming so close that this, 1,000 votes here or 2,000 votes there can really, really make the difference. I would like to also let our visitors from around the world and visitors here too, our listeners know that we might not know. Pennsylvania is very slow. Some of these states, you might not get results for several days. Sometimes it's even a week or so. I think last time with Joe Biden, you found out that Saturday, but that still was quite a few days delay.
And it was right in the middle of that crazy thing happening in Pennsylvania where we had Giuliani at that Four Seasons landscaping where they thought it was the Four Seasons Hotel. It was this kind of crazy stuff that was happening. And the hard part for me, Mary, is to see that not only did Donald Trump, after inciting an insurrection, after being convicted 34 times, all of that, not only is he the candidate, but he has a real shot to be president again. What does it say about America, about the short memory? He keeps saying, were you better off 4 years ago than you are today? 4 years ago, Americans were dying by the hundreds of thousands. A country with 5% of the world's population had 20% of the world's deaths, in part directly because of his leadership or lack thereof. And the economy, we had the biggest recession since the Great Depression that happened, and still people are being told that things were great 4 years ago.
I know you lived in New York. They had sort of portable morgues in the streets with bodies. And he was telling people about injecting bleach. We're going to have big, beautiful, the churches will be open and people will be there. And also things like he was putting children, separating children from parents at the border. They still haven't tracked them all down. And of course, January 6th, the insurrection. I think Gore Vidal called it the United States of amnesia. And also, I do think we will have to realize that the standards, even for covering Donald Trump, are different. I think a commentator on CNN said he can be lawless, she has to be flawless. And that's been interesting too. You'll see she will say something and it's a little bit unclear and there'll be all these stories about it. I mean, even the fact that after Joe Biden got out of the race, you had this 78-year-old candidate, Donald Trump, who is misstating things, stumbling, doing all that. And we never, after Joe Biden left the race, we never heard about age, very little, as an issue being brought up in the media. And some days when Biden was in, someone who has traditionally not been the most gifted and smooth of speakers, who also stuttered, everything was picked apart relentlessly day after day. And I'm a person in the media, but I do see that some media people feel like, oh, well, that's Trump, and people will write it off as Trump, but it's still our duty to report it. And I heard that some younger voters, the youngest of voters who were children before, now are voting, and they saw the Access Hollywood tape when he said he would grab women by the genitals, and they were surprised by this and said, oh, how did this guy get elected? And you realize that younger voters, this wasn't in their consciousness. But yet we have journalists saying, well, everybody knows everything about Trump and it's baked into it. He was talking about Hannibal Lecter, all these things. And the standards are totally, totally different. He talked about the enemy within. He closed on such a dark, dark tone. And yet we treat them, because I think we want to feel like it's normal. We want to normalize the two. We don't want to, as journalists, say this is something far beyond anything we've ever seen. What do you think?
I think that you've identified so many truisms. The problem is that we are not paying enough attention, and we're not holding the facts to account. So what I mean by that is Project 2025, which is going to go after so many problems in this, is going to directly affect and cause problems in this country, is going to be what is being followed by the new Trump administration if he wins. And he can just say, I have nothing to do with it, when everybody knows and they're bragging that we are now going to have this. So he has something called Agenda 47. It's the same thing. It is not very different. So when people say, oh, you know, he's so strong on the economy, he's so strong on the border, those are the things that matter. That's where they're wrong. And that's the price that this country will pay when this happens. You know, a lot of people said, we survived 4 years of Trump. What's the big deal? Well, say that to the hundreds of thousands of people who shouldn't have lost their lives during the pandemic. And also know that last time he was surrounded by a lot of traditional Republicans. They're all the ones who turned on him, obviously, and have called him a fascist and other things. But now he's going to be surrounded by absolute loyalists. That's going to be a test, and that's going to cause problems. There's going to be no one to hold him in check this time if he wins. We are going to take a look at the New York Times needle to see how it's going, where we are. There's still too early to call in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Arizona. The chances of winning are towards Trump at the moment, but we still have a long way to go. It's going to be a long night. We're going to do this show for about another 15 minutes or so, see what happens around the 10 o'clock Eastern hour. It's about 9:50 here in New York. And then we will take a break, and then we'll come back with a even bigger show for the Indian Express. America Decides is the name of that show. And we will be live at 11 p.m. Eastern time, which is 9:30 p.m. in India, but of course, viewed around the world on the Indian Express channel. So wherever you're watching from right now, and our guests there are Mary and Lee Meringhoff, director of the famous Marist poll. So we can ask him exactly what went down, what he got right, what things that the pollsters got wrong. We will learn all of that together. So please join us, and we'll also be live tomorrow morning to see the aftermath of the elections. If we have a result, we'll be joined by Shauna Vircher, the political fixer. She's a star on TikTok and really gets that young audience to understand what's happening with the political situation. So there's so much going on. If you want to know when we're live, use our WhatsApp alert. As you can see there, our QR code, just use that and you can know when we are live so that you can watch us. It's a very low volume WhatsApp group, no conversation there, just announcements. So I'm so grateful to our friend Mary for being here. Mary, we are still too close to call on so many races, but you're not surprised by that at all.
I am not. I really am not, because Kamala Harris did not emphasize her race or her gender in the same way as Hillary did, but it's obvious because she is who she is when you see her. And I think some people are inspired by that, and some people who fear what they see as a changing America, that scares them. And there's a certain amount of fear there, even though she has made it her point to reach out to all Americans, when it's very clear when Donald Trump speaks, he is only reaching out to be the president for his base. And I guess if you are part of that base, you feel like I'll be fine. But remember, there are a lot of women who voted for him in places like Texas that when he got in and appointed the judges that overturned Roe, their health care was affected. We've had reporting from ProPublica on women in Texas and Georgia who have actually died because they haven't gotten the health care they need. It's not just abortion rights, it's all kinds of health care, because you go to the hospital and before you get treated, they talk to the lawyers. And I'm glad you brought up Project 2025. So many, many members of Trump administration and his associates have had a piece of that. And just I advise people to read some of it. It's do away with Head Start, pretty much. Public schooling, they don't particularly like that, to do away with the Department of Education. This doesn't just affect cities. A lot of rural areas depend on their public schools. A lot of programs for lunches, free lunches and things like that. It's pretty much saying you're on your own. It's teachers who are now teachers and librarians who are reprimanded for teaching certain books or certain kinds of history. There are fines and jail sentences for this kinds of thing. And also, teaching a version of history, and Donald Trump has talked about it. If you talk about race or a history that shows that America was anything but this place that always had liberty and justice for all, that he will want to defund you. And that, of course, is not the truth. And as I said, my son's a historian and I'm sort of invested in this, but we need to know about these things. And that was the point. Martin Luther King Jr. used to say, all America needs to do is live up to the words, but it hasn't always. And if you're not teaching the truth about indigenous people and internment camps and enslavement, that is a part of America as well. And you're erasing the experience of so many people. And you also want your children to grow up without empathy, I would think. It's this not terrible to teach them about that. And that is all in Project 2025. And Trump has talked, as you said, about all of these things. It's a vision of an America. He says, make America great again. And that's going back to something that never was, because America was, I don't want to go back any at all, because America wasn't always great for a great deal of Americans. And the point is, we have people who fought and died for this country because they loved it so much, even though they weren't receiving justice in this country. And that's a beautiful thing. That's something that's exemplary. That's not a negative. They were fighting for the ideal, and they fought for the ideal. And why would you not want to share that with children growing up? I don't get it. But looking around, I see that there are many of my fellow citizens, even some of my own neighbors, who feel that way. My neighbors in a neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina, that my parents couldn't have lived in because there were restricted covenants in the deeds that said you may not sell or rent to anyone not of the Caucasian race. And it wasn't until the Fair Housing Act of 1968 that said you couldn't have these covenants. Although I wouldn't have wanted to be the Black person that moved in here in 1969, I tell you. So, and because, GIs coming back who are of color, Black GIs, didn't get the benefits. They couldn't move into these neighborhoods. This is history that sometimes when I say it to well-educated people, they say, oh, I didn't know that. They want people not to know the truth. And I don't know, it's emotionally very difficult for me to deal with that there are people who don't want to have that at all.
Yeah, I'm looking at the polls closing. You can see that at 10 p.m. in just a couple of minutes, we'll have some new results and we'll have a little more clarity. And we'll go for about 10 more minutes after that, just to understand what's happening, Mary. And then we're going to take a break. You're going to take a break, and we're going to come back for America Decides, our coverage on the Indian Express. We're so delighted that we've been on Scroll.com, Scroll.in in India, and Scroll Global, right on their homepage, and talking to an audience both in the United States and around the world. And then we will be moving to our show at 11 p.m. Eastern. So we will be back, and you will be back as well. And we are very grateful to you, Mary, for being with us all of this time. There is so much going on. As Ms. Commerce says, it's election watch, and that's what we are looking at right now. The New York Times is saying that it's a 73% chance, likelihood that Trump will be elected president, but that is not over. It still depends on Pennsylvania, still depends on Michigan, still depends on Arizona and Nevada. So we have time to see who will be president, but the news isn't positive. If you're a Kamala Harris fan, if you're a Donald Trump fan, you're very confident at this moment. and we will know more in the time that goes by. In the next 10 minutes, we'll learn some more, and then we'll know more in the next hour at 11 p.m. Eastern time, which is 9:30 a.m. in India time. We want everybody to come back and find us on the Indian Express channels, because there you will see where we are. We'll go for about an hour. We'll go till midnight at least to see what we can understand. And we'll be joined by Lee Meringhoff of the famous Marist poll, one of the most important polls in the United States. He will be with us at 11 p.m. Eastern time, 9:30 a.m. in India on Wednesday. So that's going to be about an hour from now. And what I'd like to do now is go to the screen to see what is happening on the, you can see here that we're going to get alerts in just a bit. The right to abortion has been called in Maryland. So there are these state ballots, and the right to abortion has been, there's an amendment in New York that codifies that. But just look, almost 1 million people in New York voted no. So these states, even though they're red and blue, there are hundreds of thousands of people, sometimes 1 million people who dissent on whatever the popular feeling is of that state. And that's something that also people need to understand about America and the American election. So it's just past 10 p.m. We'll go for another 10 minutes or so, and let's see if we get any projections that are worth noting. So there's going to be a projection, as you see on CNN right now. Harris has won Illinois, not a surprise.
No.
So far, very few surprises.
It's close in Virginia, and Trump is feeling confident with 66% of the votes in. He's leading. He's leading
in Virginia.
Yes.
Yeah, Neil, go ahead. That's our executive producer, Neil. When Randall was saying he was so impressed how I was able to keep track of everything, that's because of Neil and Christian, our producers, who are helping with our shows and making a big difference in our being able to cover this. So please go ahead, Neil.
I was just going to jump in because Mary had mentioned it earlier. Of course, I'm based in Virginia, so we're hearing a lot about the Larry Hogan, Angela Alsobrooks race. The Associated Press has called the race for Angela Alsobrooks. I've not found it on the New York Times yet, but the Associated Press has called this race with 63% reporting. They have it as 53.2% for Angela Alsobrooks, 44.5% for Larry Hogan. What I think is interesting about that, Sree, in terms of the way the Larry Hogan campaign, he was a very popular governor in Maryland, a Republican governor. Some thought he might run for president 4 years ago, but they really pushed a ticket splitting strategy in Maryland. They encouraged people to vote for Kamala Harris, but vote for Larry Hogan in the Senate. And it seems if the AP's call holds, that strategy may have failed. We may have the first Black woman senator from Maryland, and just the fourth serving senator after Carol Moseley Braun, Kamala Harris, LaFonza Butler, who was appointed to Kamala's seat, and now Angela Alsobrooks in Maryland.
It's like we were talking about earlier. There's less of the ticket splitting going on.
By the way, just look at Pennsylvania. 1 second. Just look how close that is. It's so,
oh my goodness,
it's so close. Yeah.
And I think earlier I was mentioning that in North Carolina, they had a ballot measure that would provide in the state constitution that only a citizen can vote, rather than every citizen of the U.S. may vote in federal elections. And it passed overwhelmingly. It looks like it's right now 77-22. But there was actually a lot of folks saying you really should vote no, because it's already against the law for that to happen. And they thought that changing the wording of it might leave it open to actually putting some more restrictions on who can vote. But it indeed has passed overwhelmingly, interestingly enough. So ballot measures are on, all, as you said, Sree, on all of these races too. So yeah, it's so tight. Oh, it's just interesting. Iowa, it's only 30% reporting, but she's leading by a tiny measure. She probably won't win it, but
there was a breaking news poll over the weekend that called it for Kamala Harris. So that's kind of interesting to see what happens. Look how close Pennsylvania is. If you look on the upper left, that's MSNBC. Right side is Fox, and the bottom is CNN. And he's also leading in the popular vote as of now. We haven't gotten the big liberal states from California and those votes haven't come in. But you're going to see, even in California, he will get millions of votes. For Donald Trump will get millions of votes. Folks, right now, the popular vote estimate is Harris is ahead. But again, this is the live forecast. We don't know. But the popular vote does not matter. No. That's the point to be made, that it's all about the Electoral College. And what happens with that is you can see right now it's trending towards Trump. But she's leading in Michigan, leading in Pennsylvania, leading in Wisconsin. But those votes have not been fully counted. And that will make a difference.
What's interesting here, Sree, is and it's moving as we speak. It's interesting that the New York Times shows what the values were in 2016 and 2020 to give you a sense of that history. In 2016, you had Trump, pushing it much above about 315 to the right. To this side, and you had Biden on the other side. In 2020. So you see where things stand, at least their estimate of the Electoral College doesn't look good right now.
No,
doesn't look good.
If you're a Harris fan, this doesn't look good, but we don't know what's going to happen. Folks, where are you watching from? Tell us, post your comments, and we would love to hear from you as we are watching the very close election. I came to this country in 1980 as a 9-year-old, and have been following the elections, starting with that election. And I have never seen it this close and this fraught and so much at stake. I mean, this is what we started the show with, the moment of truth in the Atlantic.
J.D. Vance must be really happy right now.
Yeah, well, J.D. Vance is somebody who imagine calling calling someone America's Hitler and saying that he is America's heroine, and then running as his candidate. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about J.D. Vance, who has lied repeatedly, who has capitalized on the impression that he is a man of the people, who is talking to America's poor, as is Donald Trump, but is being used and manipulated so extensively by Peter Thiel as well as by Elon Musk. And those are two apartheid-era South African immigrants to the United States, billionaires who have enormous influence. That's one of the things that has changed since 2016, where Elon Musk has bought Twitter. He's with Donald Trump right now in Mar-a-Lago. And people like me said, what a waste of $44 billion. I was wrong, Mary. It was a brilliant purchase. It was a steal. For $44 billion, he's buying a country, and he's buying a presidency at this moment. And that's what we will be paying attention to when we come back at 11 p.m. Eastern. Go ahead, Mary.
No, yes, and he has contracts with, this will be, if Trump is reelected, it's all tied up with business people who have contracts with the government, which is kind of scary when you think about it. And he also was giving those $1 million checks away in Pennsylvania, which some might think is election interference, but the judge there said, no, that's fine. It is, I'm sitting here astonished in a sense, but yes, it's the Electoral College, or else we'd be talking about President Gore and President Clinton in the United States. And the small states, as you say, sparsely small in population, will not want to ever give that up. I mean, it's so fascinating to me that Wyoming has the same amount of senators as California.
And that's to support the slave owning states. And that's why the Constitution was built like that. And that's something that people know, but that's just the reality of where we are. Neil, I know we've got to start wrapping up, so I want to show a couple of things, but go ahead, Neil.
Two quick updates. I was going to mention the New York Times is reporting that Angela Alsobrooks has won, so that looks like it is confirmed. The other thing I wanted to mention, because we were talking about her being the 4th Black woman senator, Lisa Blunt Rochester in Delaware won her race as well. That was actually a foregone conclusion once she won the primary there in that very Democratic-leaning state. So just want to keep that count accurate. I think that puts us up at 5 Black women, with 2 entering this year.
Thank you, Neil. I want to show a couple of things before we take a break. We'll come back at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find me on all my channels as well as on Indian Express's social media channels. Millions of followers there. We're very excited to be there, as we have been to be excited to be here on Scroll. I want to show you right now. That's Josh Stein in North Carolina and my friend Suraj Dhingra of the Jaipur Lit Festival, JLF, North Carolina, that night in September, where Mark Robinson's crazy rantings, I met Josh Stein, and he had this confidence that he would be the next governor of North Carolina. The question was, could he also get Kamala Harris elected there? And at the moment, it's not looking like that's the case. But I was very impressed by him. Very, very smart man. And he'll be doing a lot for North Carolina. So the state is in good hands. I don't know about the rest of the country, but the state is in good hands there. So I wanted to...
his father was a civil rights lawyer. He was in the first integrated law firm in North Carolina, along with the great Julius Chambers, very well known from NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And so he grew up as a kid having bomb threats on his house. And Julius Chambers' actually house was bombed. They weren't there at the time. The offices were threatened and bombed. So he comes from that tradition. Josh Stein. He's quiet. He's not as gregarious as Roy Cooper. And that was thought that it might be a problem because he doesn't campaign in that way. But he's been a wonderful attorney general. So that is a comfort.
Steve Taylor says, thank you for this great coverage and analysis. And he's watching from Philadelphia. So he has been inundated with all kinds of news and ads. I did want to show a couple of more things before we take our break. I wanted to show you right here on the screen. You can see this is a series of ads in Texas in 2 South Indian languages, in Telugu as well as in Tamil. And it shows you how much outreach there was to the Indian American community. I also wanted to show all of you this video that my friend Shobana put together, a song called Vote. And let's see. So you can find this, folks, at Shobana Dance on Instagram, where she made the case for people to vote. So South Asians were working very hard to get Kamala Harris elected. We will see if they end up being successful. Jonathan says, compelling coverage. Thank you very much. And Apollo says, this was an amazing time. Thank you. He's watching from Philadelphia also. We're just so grateful to everyone. Neil, unless there is some breaking news, I think we will stop here and we'll come back at 11 p.m. Eastern Time on the various channels.
Absolutely. We will see everyone at 11 o'clock. And then tomorrow morning again with Shauna Vircher. So that is, the order will be 11 p.m. Eastern Time for the Indian Express with Lee Maringoff, director of the Marist Poll. And then tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, morning for the U.S., 7 p.m. India Standard Time with Shauna Vircher. Thank you very much, and keep watching, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Good night. Thank you, Mary. We'll see you in a bit. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.